Greetings, Tom Romeo from PCS. Very happy to present a histology project tracker for EPL, that's Experimental Pathology Laboratories. The goal here is to demonstrate how you can use barcodes to track histology projects throughout the organization. As you can see, we changed the title on the main page to Histology Project Tracker. We can change that to anything we like. I mean, all of these titles are customizable. Obviously, we were able to put the company logo up there. Also, before we log into the system, I'd like to show you that we are running from an Azure VM up in the cloud. This particular Azure VM is only for demonstration purposes. We bring it up, create some demo data for demonstrating how we would use Traverse, and then we bring it down as to not incur any costs. Our other Azure VMs actually have real customer databases on them, and they actually have a server certificate, so it's secure. In this particular case, I believe that it would make much more sense to install Traverse on-premise, but we'll get into that. So I've logged in, and the very first thing I always like to show is our search capability. So I typed in one word, Nile, and you can see it brought up all of the items within the system that can be associated with that word. Notice we've got a Gusset, and then we've got several file folders, okay? And several of these file folders are in a particular location, and one of them, it looks like, is checked out to somebody, and we're going to go look at that. So the Gusset would be one of those large green hanging folders that you put inside a file cabinet, and then each of these files would be inside that Gusset. And again, everything here is for demonstration purposes. You know, you can configure the system many different ways. So as I click on the Gusset, it brings up the Gusset record, and if there were history, it would show. Obviously, we didn't do anything with that Gusset, but I'll show you how that works. And here's the family tree. So now you see we're at the Gusset record. It's at this location, and it contains these file folders. So let's first look at the location. By looking at the location, we'll see it's one of many physical locations within the building, and it could have various attributes. And of course, you can change these attributes to meet your needs. And then the items at that location are listed right here, just like we saw on the asset. So if I bypass the Gusset and go to one of the actual file folders, now you'll see something different. Notice the little blue box. It shows the physical location of the file folder. Notice the put away location, which is where this item belongs, as opposed to the current location, which could be different. The type is file. And you notice here, add edit files on the menu, and notice also it says file ID, and I'm going to show you why that's important. Also, we've got custom fields. So there's a project, a subject, and these are items that when we created the item type, we declared these custom fields as this, notes. And again, all of this data is purely fictional. I do not know if Reston had a West Nile issue in 2016. It's just so happens that Reston is near Sterling, Virginia, and I wanted to try to keep things relevant. So let's go look at the different asset types and how they're set up. So the very first type I created was a cabinet, a file cabinet. And you could see it is the parent, the main parent. And you could have many different kinds of main parents, but I can't imagine that you would take a file cabinet and put it within another container, though anything is possible. Okay, so the next level down would be the Gusset. And notice how the Gusset can be a container, and it can be contained. It can be contained within a file cabinet, and it can be a container of other file folders. Let's show you how that works. So I click on the Gusset, and you see we set up the relationship. So now these are the rules. Based on these rules, I cannot put a Gusset within another Gusset. If I check these boxes and save it, I can, but right now the way this is set up, I cannot put a gusset within another gusset. But I can put files and folders within a gusset, and I could put a gusset in a cabinet, but I cannot put a cabinet inside of any of these items. Pretty straightforward. We go back to asset types, and I'll go to the file type. And you could see it can be a container also, because you could probably want to put a file within a file, maybe, maybe not. And it could be contained within other items. And the custom fields that we have set up, custom character 1, which would be a character field, and that was the project that we saw on that item, and the subject. Then we have some dates, remember, due back and returned, and we would collect the due back on an out transaction, and we would collect the returned on an in transaction. And again, you can customize these things any way you like. Custom text, that's a much larger field, and I just named them Notes 1 and Notes 2, but you can name them anything you like. So let's go down to the system configuration and go through a few items here. There's the company name and info. Config values, right? There's the title we saw on the main page. Some more config values. Now remember, we're looking at files, but for this histology project tracking system, wow, that was a tongue twister, we could say data sheets. Save it. And now if I go back home, well, I'm not going to do that just yet. We will come back to that. I want to point out email errors. Email errors means if any error occurs in the system and you've got the level of support, the error will come immediately to PCS so that we can start working on a problem if it occurs even before you report it. Okay? Email notification means if you set up specific notifications within the system, let's say something is due back at a certain time, when somebody checks that item out, it'll put a reminder on his calendar. So we can configure a whole bunch of notifications and other actions within the system, and we're going to show you that. Archive and purge. This is important because many times you buy a system from somebody and it collects data and it keeps collecting data, and 10 years down the line the system's so bogged down with data that it becomes sluggish or stops working. So we have an archive module and you can configure this to be years, month, days. So we set this one up so that all transactions, not the actual data. The data is the data. Like if you create an asset, a file folder, whatever, nothing happens to that. But if you have transactions against that file folder, those transactions will be archived into the historical tables after 6 months and then purged after 3 years. But you can change this to 10 years if you like. You can change this to 2 months or 2 years if you like. So the archive takes place every night. We also have a database module that takes care of reindexing your tables and all kinds of other database related health checks so that your system starts out performing well and 3 years, 10 years down the line it continues to perform well. SMTP info, this is how the email notifications take place. So that's the SMTP server information that we use, and it's all, as you see, it's part of Azure, and again that was the main address of the company. Back home, because I want to show you that change we made, now you'll notice it says add edit data sheets instead of add edit files. And if I type in Reston, now we've got more data. Now I've got the actual client. If I click on the client record and I look at the items, you can see that these are all the items that are associated with that client. Now you notice this one is checked out to me. But let's pick on a file folder, and you'll notice it says file ID here because it's type file. Let's go back to the family tree. And you notice that's Gusset ID because it's type Gusset. Now, what's important about this is because that is the main title for the task, but these items are driven by the asset type. So, for example, if I pick up File, see the button text, I could say Data Sheet here as well. And now, if we come back home and instead of doing a search, I'll click on it from here. Now it says Datasheet ID, and also notice check out this datasheet. So if I want to check it out to somebody, I can check it out to, I'll check it out to me because I don't want Dan to get a whole bunch of emails. And I'll say it's due back on the 11th. And it's been checked out. Notice how the information in the box has changed. Now, if I was checking that item out to someone else, that means I'm saying, hey, that person has it. When that person logs into the system, he can then say accept it and scan the data sheet that he's accepted it, and it would automatically then show that that person actually has it. So it's a two-phase commit. Well, we're not going to go into those things. Why don't we just go quickly at the reports, and then we're going to end the video because I don't like the videos to take too long. So report formats can be Excel report, Excel sheet, HTML, PDF, Microsoft Word. The default is PDF. If we're printing barcode labels, there are different Avery formats. And so let's say I was going to print out all the data sheets in the system. So here I'd have an Avery sheet, and this looks to be, this might be a 20, this might be a 30 items per sheet data sheet. You print it out, you peel them off and put them on each label. I can get a detail report, and that just shows, and notice how the EPL logo is on the reports as well. I could also select by category ID, and then I could put in additional criteria on these and narrow my search. And pretty much that's it for now. As I said, I don't want to make the video too long, but I do like to emphasize that this searchability is pretty powerful. Just with a few words, you can find anything you want, and that's the other thing we talk about is when we're labeling all of our assets, that we put in enough description so that it's easy to find stuff and it's easy to recognize stuff. And I'll show you what that means. I just want to check this item in so I could show you the history. So I'm going to put it back into the Gusset. Where is the Gusset? Here it is. And I'll put today's date. Typically, you would do this with barcodes. You wouldn't be dropping it from a drop-down list. You would scan the barcode, but I'm not using a barcode scanner right now. So here's the history of that item. See how it was checked in most recently, and it was checked out. And it shows that history, and it shows it in reverse chronological order. Let's go back up to the top. So again, when looking at items, by having enough description, you'll know what you're looking at instead of just numbering them 1, 2, 3, 4. It'll be very difficult to find items. So you want to be careful about naming things. And obviously, there's not a lot of data in the system right now because this is just for demonstration purposes. But you can see how as the data grows, it can become quite confusing, and that's why you want to be very careful about naming.